No plan, no progress. We don't like to admit it, but most of us are not lost because we lack ability. We are lost because we lack direction. We wake up, we move, we work, we push, we chase, and at the end of the day, we feel tired but not fulfilled. Busy but not advancing, exhausted but not evolving, and deep down we know why, because movement without purpose is not progress. It is simply motion, and motion without a plan is just a sophisticated way of avoiding the truth. We live in a culture that celebrates hustle. We applaud long hours, late nights, endless effort. But effort without intention is like rowing a boat without knowing where the shore is. You can row H-language, A-R-D-E-R. You can row faster. Character or but E-A, you don't C-R-E, a no T, the E, your own ocean. All you're doing is drifting with more intensity. A plan is not just a schedule. A plan is a decision. It is the moment you stop reacting and start leading. Most people don't fail because they chose the wrong path. They fail because they never chose one at all. They let circumstances decide. They let mood decide. They let fear decide. And when life begins to shape them instead of them shaping life, progress becomes accidental instead of intentional. And accidental progress is unreliable. A plan does not guarantee success, but the absence of a plan almost always guarantees stagnation. Because when you don't know what you're building, every distraction becomes seductive, every excuse feels justified, every delay feels reasonable, and that's the invisible danger, not chaos, comfort, the comfort of saying, "I'll figure it out," instead of committing to clarity. But clarity demands courage. It forces you to answer uncomfortable questions. Where are you going? Why does it matter? Who must you become to get there? Most people avoid these questions not because they're difficult, but because the answers remove their excuses. A plan exposes self-deception. It replaces vague intention with measurable direction. It turns hope into structure. Without a plan, you rely on motivation, and motivation is emotional. It rises and falls. It is unreliable. But a plan is not emotional. A plan is disciplined. It doesn't care how you feel. It only cares who you committed to become. That's why a plan is powerful. It outlasts mood. It survives doubt. It guides you when inspiration disappears. Because progress does not come from bursts of enthusiasm, it comes from quiet consistency, and consistency only exists when direction exists. The uncomfortable truth is this: many people are proud of being busy because it feels like progress. But busyness is often just a disguise for lack of clarity. When you don't know what truly matters, everything feels urgent. When you don't have a plan, everything feels important. And when everything is important, nothing is prioritized. A plan creates hierarchy. It separates the essential from the noise. It teaches you what to say no to. And saying no is one of the most underrated skills in progress, because every yes to distraction is a no to growth. Every unplanned decision costs you momentum. Every unfocused hour weakens your trajectory, but a plan anchors you. It becomes a compass when the world tries to pull you in 1,000 directions. It reminds you not just what you're doing, but why you're doing it. And purpose is what gives a plan its strength, because a plan without purpose becomes a prison, but a plan rooted in meaning becomes a guide. It becomes a contract between who you are and who you refuse to remain. Progress is not a dramatic leap. It is a series of small, intentional choices repeated over time, and those choices do not happen by chance. They happen by design. Design requires thought. Thought requires clarity. Clarity requires honesty. So ask yourself not just what you want, but what you're willing to sacrifice, because every plan demands a price. Time, comfort, old habits, familiar excuses, and growth always asks for something in return. Most people want the reward without redesigning their routines. They want the outcome without changing the system, but real progress comes when you stop managing outcomes and start designing processes. A plan is a system for becoming, and becoming is not glamorous, it is repetitive, it is quiet, it is inconvenient. But it is powerful, because when your environment aligns with your plan, progress becomes inevitable. Not fast, not always visible, but consistent, and consistency compounds. The greatest transformations are rarely loud. They happen in silence, in discipline, in moments when no one is watching, and you choose to honor the plan anyway. That's where identity is forged, not when you feel inspired, but when you feel tired, not when it is easy, but when it feels pointless, and that is the difference between someone who dreams and someone who builds. Dreamers wait for the perfect moment. Builders create momentum inside imperfect conditions, and momentum is born when direction meets action. A plan turns fear into focus. It transforms overwhelm into steps. It converts ambition into movement. Not because the plan is perfect, but because it exists. Progress does not require perfection, it requires alignment. Alignment between intention and action, between values and behavior, between today and tomorrow. When you operate without a plan, each day becomes a negotiation with yourself. Should I continue? Should I stop? Should I try again tomorrow? But when you have a plan, the decision has already been made. You are no longer negotiating with doubt. You are executing a commitment, and commitment changes behavior. It changes how you spend your time, it changes the company you keep, it changes the standards you tolerate. A plan forces you to evolve to the level of your vision, and evolution is uncomfortable, because comfort zones are predictable. Growth is not, but the discomfort of discipline is temporary. The discomfort of regret lasts far longer. And the people who progress understand this. They don't romanticize spontaneity. They respect structure. They honor process. They understand that progress is systematic, not spontaneous. If you want different results, you need different systems. If you want growth, you need guidance. If you want progress, you need a plan and not a vague idea. Not a wish disguised as a goal. A real plan is specific. It is intentional. It is measurable. It is owned. It lives not just in your mind, but in your habits, because the plan is not what you say you'll do. The plan is what you repeat. And what you repeat becomes who you are. So the question is not whether you want to progress. Everyone wants that. The question is whether you're willing to plan for it when enthusiasm fades, when comfort beckons, when excuses sound logical. Because the truth doesn't change, no plan, no progress, no clarity, no consistency, no direction, no momentum. But when you choose to plan, you choose leadership, you choose intentionality, you choose to stop drifting and start becoming. You stop letting time happen to you and start using time deliberately, and in that moment something shifts. You stop reacting, you start building, you stop chasing, you start designing, you stop hoping, you start executing. And that is when progress stops being a dream and starts becoming a reality shaped by your decisions. Not tomorrow, not someday, not when it feels right, now, because progress doesn't begin with motivation. It begins with a plan, and the moment you respect the plan will begin to transform you. No plan. No progress, but with intention, with clarity, with disciplined direction, progress becomes not just possible, but inevitable. No plan, no progress, and still, so many people resist the very thing that would save them. They resist structure as if it were a cage. They romanticize spontaneity as if randomness were freedom, but freedom is not found in chaos, freedom is found in clarity. Because when you know where you are going, you no longer fear the silence, you no longer fear the stillness. You no longer fear choosing one path over another, you walk with intention, and intention is not accidental. It is deliberate. Most people do not fail loudly, they fail slowly, quietly, one unplanned day at a time. One postponed decision after another, one excuse that sounds reasonable until it becomes a lifestyle. And the tragedy is not that they dream too big. The tragedy is that they plan too little. They don't lack ambition. They lack alignment. Alignment between what they say matters and what they practice daily. Alignment between the future they want and the habits they tolerate. Alignment between desire and discipline, and a plan is the bridge between those two worlds. Without that bridge, people live permanently suspended between potential and reality. Always preparing, always almost ready, always waiting for the perfect moment that never arrives, but progress does not respect your comfort. It respects your commitment. We've been conditioned to believe that progress should feel exciting, inspiring, energizing. But the truth is, real progress is often quiet. It is repetitive. It is methodical. It is invisible to everyone except the one doing the work. A plan removes drama. It removes guesswork. It removes the emotional roller coaster of "do I feel like this today?" Because progress has never belonged to those who felt like it. It belongs to those who decided to do it even when they didn't. And here's the uncomfortable reality. Most people don't fear failure. They fear responsibility, because a plan doesn't just organize actions, it organizes accountability. It makes you confront the distance between who you are and who you claim you want to become, and that gap can be sobering. Because once the plan exists, there is no one else to blame. No more "I didn't have time," no more "I wasn't ready," no more "life got in the way." A plan removes your hiding place. And hiding feels safe, growth does not. But safety without progress is simply stagnation in disguise. To plan is to admit that your current behavior is not enough. It is to accept that something must change. And change requires discomfort. It requires the humility to say, "What got me here will not get me where I want to go." Without a plan, days blend into weeks. Weeks into years, and one day you look back and realize you've been busy surviving instead of intentionally building. And that moment hurts, because deep down you know the truth. You always did. You knew that direction was missing. You knew that effort wasn't structured. You knew that motion wasn't progress, but knowing without action changes nothing. A plan is action made visible. It takes invisible intention and gives it form, shape, direction, and here's the paradox. The more committed your plan becomes, the more confident you become. Not because the journey is easier, but because you trust your system. You trust your process. You trust the path you chose. Confidence is not born from talent, it is born from clarity, and clarity is born from planning. When you plan, you don't just prepare for success. You prepare for doubt, you prepare for fatigue, you prepare for resistance, and that preparation is what makes you resilient. Because you don't need to feel brave when the system already knows what to do, you just follow the plan. But most people want the confidence before the discipline. They want the certainty before the structure. They want the result before the effort, and that order has never existed. Progress is not emotional. It is engineered, and an engineered life is intentional. That does not mean rigid. It means aware. It means conscious. It means no longer living on autopilot. Autopilot feels easy, but easy is often expensive in the long term. You pay for lack of planning in regret. You pay for absence of structure in wasted potential. You pay for indecision in lost time. And time does not pause. Time does not negotiate. Time does not care how busy you feel. It only rewards those who respect it. A plan is respect for time. It says, "My future matters enough for me to design it." And that statement alone separates the leaders from the drifters. The intentional from the reactive, the builders from the wishers, because without a plan, you don't lead your days. Your days lead you. You wake up responding instead of creating. You react instead of designing. You adjust instead of directing. And gradually, you become a passenger in your own life. Comfortable, perhaps, but unfulfilled. Progress does not live in comfort. It lives in consistency. Consistency does not come from excitement. It comes from structure. Structure does not appear from nowhere. It comes from planning. This is not about controlling every moment. This is about deciding what matters and honoring that decision repeatedly. And repetition is powerful because identity is not built on promises. Identity is built on patterns. What you repeatedly do defines who you become, and what you repeatedly do should not be accidental. That is what a plan ensures. You begin to move with purpose instead of pressure, with intention instead of impulse, with discipline instead of desperation, and over time something remarkable happens. You stop needing motivation. You stop relying on mood. You stop negotiating with procrastination, because your behavior is no longer emotional. It is strategic, and strategy outlasts enthusiasm. When you plan, failure no longer feels like a collapse. It feels like recalibration, adjustment, refinement, because the plan is not just a map. It is a framework for learning. You evolve not by avoiding mistakes, but by organizing your response to them, and a well-defined plan allows progress to continue even when confidence fails. That's the difference. People who drift stop when they feel discouraged. People who plan continue because direction exists. They trust the process because they designed it. The absence of a plan makes every obstacle feel like a wall. The presence of a plan transforms obstacles into data, data that informs the next step, data that sharpens focus, data that strengthens resilience, because progress is not a straight line. It is a disciplined curve guided by intention. An intention only survives when it has structure, so the question is never about talent. It is never about luck. It is never about timing. The question is whether you have the courage to decide where you are going and the discipline to honor that decision when no one is applauding. Because the loudest progress is silent. It happens when no one is watching, when excuses are loud and you choose action anyway. When comfort whispers and you choose focus instead. That is the power of a plan. It becomes your quiet authority, your internal compass, your standard when chaos tries to distract you, and eventually the world catches up to your clarity. Not because you forced it, but because you aligned with it. No plan, no progress. It has never been about how much you want it. It has always been about how intentionally you pursue it. Wanting is emotional, planning is strategic. And strategy builds results, so here is the moment of honesty, not for the world, not for validation. Not for applause, just for you. Are you drifting or directing? Are you reacting or designing? Are you moving or progressing? Because progress is never accidental. It is chosen, structured, rehearsed, repeated. And the moment you decide to plan is the moment you decide to take responsibility for your future. Responsibility is not heavy when it has purpose. Discipline is not painful when it has meaning. Effort is not exhausting when it has direction. Without a plan, you stay busy. With a plan, you become effective. Without a plan, you fear time. With a plan, you use it. Without a plan, you hope. With a plan, you build. And building is transformation, not overnight, not dramatically. Not magically, but steadily, intentionally, inevitably. Because when your actions have alignment, momentum follows. When your habits have structure, progress compounds. When your life has direction, purpose strengthens. No plan, no progress, but with a plan you stop wandering, you stop wishing, you stop waiting, and you begin becoming. No plan, no progress. It sounds simple, almost too simple, and perhaps that is why so many people ignore it. Because simplicity is often mistaken for insignificance, but the truths that shape our lives are rarely complicated. They are just uncomfortable to face. We like the idea of progress. We like the image of growth. We like the feeling of movement. But what we don't like is the discipline that movement demands. We celebrate the destination and avoid the direction. We admire the result and neglect the system, and then we wonder why, year after year, we remain in the same place, just older and more tired. Progress is not a gift, it is a construction, and every construction begins with a blueprint. Without a blueprint, you don't build a masterpiece. You create a mess. You pile effort on top of effort, hoping something meaningful will emerge, but hope without design is random. It is inconsistent, it is fragile. A plan gives shape to your ambition, it gives structure to your effort. It gives identity to your direction. And yet, many people hesitate to plan because they fear commitment. They fear being wrong, they fear choosing a path and discovering it wasn't perfect. But what they never realize is that standing still while searching for perfection is far more dangerous than moving forward with intention. A plan is not a final sentence, it is a starting structure. It is not rigidity, it is responsibility. Because the moment you plan, you accept ownership. You stop blaming timing, you stop blaming circumstances, you stop blaming luck. And ownership makes people uncomfortable because it removes every convenient escape. But ownership is where power lies. When you own your direction, you regain control of your narrative. You become the author instead of the observer, and that shift is subtle, but it is transformative. Most people are not exhausted because they work too hard. They are exhausted because their work has no direction. They spend days pushing energy into tasks that don't connect to a vision. They fill their time instead of fulfilling their potential, and without realizing it, they become slaves to activity instead of masters of intention. A plan saves you from this quiet drain, because a plan forces alignment. It asks you to connect your actions to your values, your habits to your goals, your present to your future, and when those connections exist, even the smallest effort becomes meaningful. The problem is not that people lack motivation. The problem is that motivation has no structure. It flares up and fades away because it has nothing to anchor it. But a plan creates that anchor. It holds you steady when enthusiasm weakens. It guides you when confidence wavers. It directs you when clarity blurs, and clarity will blur, doubt will appear, uncertainty will arrive. But that is not a sign to stop. That is a sign to trust the system you created when your mind was clear. Because progress does not belong to those who feel certain. It belongs to those who remain consistent when they don't. A plan is proof that you respect your future self enough to prepare for them and respect changes behavior. You begin to treat your time differently. You become selective about your energy. You stop giving attention to everything that demands it and start protecting what truly matters. This is where real growth begins, not when things feel aligned, but when you choose to align them, because alignment is not natural. It is chosen. You choose to wake up with intention. You choose to structure your focus. You choose to execute even when comfort whispers, "Not today." And every time you choose discipline over impulse, you strengthen the identity of someone who progresses. Progress is an identity before it is a result. An identity is built through repetition. Without a plan, repetition becomes meaningless routine. With a plan, repetition becomes mastery. Every intentional action becomes a brick in the architecture of your future. And here is the uncomfortable truth most people ignore. Talent is common, desire is common, potential is common. What is rare is the consistency that makes any of it meaningful. Consistency is not glamorous, it is predictable. It is boring, it is uncelebrated, but it is unstoppable. And consistency cannot survive without structure. That structure is your plan. It is what separates those who wish from those who build, those who talk from those who transform, those who dream from those who deliver. People admire success, but they misunderstand its origin. They see the outcome and assume it was confidence, timing, or boldness. But beneath every result is a quiet system no one noticed. Beneath every achievement is a routine no one praised. Beneath every breakthrough is a discipline no one applauded. A plan is humble work, it is unseen work. But it is the work that changes everything. When you live without a plan, every obstacle feels personal. Every delay feels defeating. Every setback feels like proof that you should stop. But when you have a plan, setbacks become information. They become guidance, they become feedback, not failure. The difference is not in the challenge, the difference is in the structure that absorbs it. A plan does not eliminate hardship, it organizes your response to it, and that response shapes your resilience. Resilience is not the absence of struggle, it is the presence of direction during struggle. It is knowing why you continue when the path feels heavy. It is holding the vision steady when the present feels uncertain, and vision without planning is just fantasy. Fantasy feels good, planning feels demanding, but only one of them builds reality. We often confuse spontaneity with authenticity. We believe that true progress should feel natural, flowing, effortless, but nature does not create great things without structure. Even the strongest systems in the world follow principles, patterns, order, and so must you. Structure does not limit you. It liberates you, it removes the chaos of indecision, it frees you from constant negotiation with yourself. It allows you to move forward without exhausting your mental energy on choices you already made intentionally. A plan decides discipline, and that decision keeps you moving when emotion would otherwise stop you. Every future you admire is the result of a series of planned moments someone honored repeatedly, not perfectly, not flawlessly, but consistently, and perfection is not required for progress. Only direction is. When you know where you are going, your choices become clearer. Your focus becomes sharper, your standards become higher, you begin to see distractions for what they are, detours from your design. And design matters because life does not improve by accident, it improves by architecture, the architecture of habit. Of structure, of intention. Without a plan, you are available to everything, and when you are available to everything, you become unavailable to what matters most. But a plan teaches you to protect your focus, to protect your energy, to protect your future. And protection is not selfish, it is necessary because progress demands priority. You cannot progress in everything. You must choose, and choosing requires clarity, and clarity requires planning. And when you choose, you accept the responsibility of growth. That responsibility changes how you walk, how you speak, how you decide, how you delay gratification for long-term impact, how you resist comfort for meaningful reward, and that resistance shapes character. Character is not what you say you value. Character is what your plan reflects. A person with no plan drifts toward convenience. A person with a plan moves toward intention. And that movement, repeated over time, becomes transformation, not through inspiration, but through structure. So many people wait to feel ready. They wait to feel confident. They wait to feel clear. But readiness is not a prerequisite for planning. Planning is what creates readiness. Clarity does not come before the plan. Clarity comes from the plan. And the courage to begin does not appear suddenly. It is forged by the first step you take despite uncertainty. The more intentional your action becomes, the more trust you build with yourself, and self-trust is the foundation of progress. When you trust your system, you no longer fear the process. You no longer fear the slow pace. You understand that progress is not fast, but it is faithful. And faithful systems always win. You do not need more motivation. You do not need more inspiration. You do not need more excitement. What you need is direction that outlives emotion. What you need is a plan that speaks when your feelings grow quiet. Because the future you admire will not be created by chance. It will be created by intentional repetition of chosen action. And that action must begin with a decision to stop floating, a decision to stop reacting, a decision to stop pretending that motion is progress, and to start designing your movement, structuring your effort, respecting your direction. No plan, no progress. It is not a warning, it is a reality, not meant to frighten you, but to liberate you, because once you understand this, once you accept it, once you act on it, everything changes. You stop waiting for the perfect moment. You stop hoping for clarity to appear on its own. You stop measuring your life by how you feel. And you start measuring it by how intentionally you live. Progress then becomes predictable, not because life is easy, but because your direction is clear. Because your effort is structured, because your behavior is aligned with who you intend to become, and that is the moment transformation becomes inevitable. Not loud, not dramatic, but steady, purposeful, unstoppable, no plan, no progress, but with a plan, you are no longer a passenger. You are the architect, and the future you build will always reflect the direction you chose to honor. No plan, no progress, it isn't a slogan, it isn't a motivational trick, it is a simple observation of how life actually works. Because progress, real progress, the kind that changes who you are and where you end up, is never born out of randomness. It is cultivated, it is chosen, it is designed long before it is ever seen, but we live in a world that glorifies momentum without meaning. Speed without direction, activity without intention, and so people move faster, work harder, fill their calendars, exhaust their energy, and still wonder why nothing truly changes. They are moving, but they are not progressing, because movement is easy. Progress is intentional, and intentionality begins with a plan. A plan is not about predicting the future. It is about preparing for it. It is about declaring, quietly but firmly, that your life will not be shaped by accident, that your direction will not be dictated by impulse, circumstance, or comfort. Most people don't avoid planning because they don't understand its value. They avoid it because planning demands honesty. It asks you to confront the gap between your dreams and your discipline. It forces you to notice the difference between what you say you want and what your habits actually reveal. And that confrontation is uncomfortable, so instead, people choose noise, distraction, endless motion. They stay busy so they don't have to be deliberate. They fill their time so they don't have to face their direction. But silence has intelligence, and in silence the truth becomes clear. You either have a plan or you are hoping. And hope without structure is fragile. It breaks under pressure. It fades under fatigue. It dissolves under doubt. A plan, however, has weight. It has form. It has presence. It stands firm when emotions hesitate. It speaks clearly when motivation disappears. It reminds you who you chose to be when your comfort tries to negotiate a lesser version of yourself. That is why progress belongs to planners, not wishers. Because wishing is passive, planning is courageous. To plan is to say, I am responsible for my future, and responsibility changes everything. It changes the way you think, the way you act, the way you interpret challenges. Without a plan, every obstacle feels discouraging. With a plan, obstacles become information. They become feedback. They refine you rather than reduce you. And refinement is where growth lives. You see, a plan does more than organize time. It organizes identity. It slowly trains you to behave like the person you claim you want to become. And over time, through repetition, identity shifts. You do not wake up evolved. You practice becoming, and practice demands structure. The reason so many people start strong and fade away is not because they lack discipline. It is because they had no system to support it. They relied on feeling instead of framework, but feelings are temporary. Systems are enduring. Progress is built on repetition. Repetition is born from structure. Structure is formed through planning. In planning is a declaration of standards. When you create a plan, you decide what is acceptable and what is not. You establish boundaries for your focus. You define what your time is for and what it is no longer available to serve. And that creates clarity. Clarity removes confusion. Confusion breeds hesitation. Hesitation kills momentum. But clarity fuels direction, and direction nurtures confidence. Confidence that does not come from praise, but from self, consistency. From knowing that you did what you said you would do, that you honored the promises made to yourself. That you stayed aligned with your intention even when no one was watching. That kind of confidence is quiet. It is grounded, it is unshakable, and it is built through planning. People often mistake freedom for lack of structure. But true freedom is not the absence of discipline, it is the absence of chaos. It is the relief of knowing that your energy is being used with purpose. That your time is being invested, not wasted. A plan is not a prison, a plan is liberation. Because when you no longer have to decide what matters every day, your mind is free to create, to focus, to grow. But without a plan, every choice becomes a burden, every moment becomes reactive, every priority shifts with emotion. And slowly, exhaustion replaces inspiration, not because you're doing too much, but because you're doing too much that doesn't matter. Progress is not about more effort, it is about precise effort, and precision requires direction, direction requires intention. Intention requires planning, and planning requires courage, because once you plan, excuses lose power. Delay loses comfort. Procrastination loses its disguise. The narrative of someday no longer satisfies you. You begin to understand that someday is simply a story we tell ourselves when we are afraid to commit to today. But today is where progress lives, not in tomorrow's fantasy, not in yesterday's regret, but in today's discipline. A plan anchors you in the present while guiding you toward the future. It connects who you are now with who you refuse to remain. And that connection is where transformation begins, because transformation is not emotional, it is behavioral. You do not change by thinking differently, you change by acting consistently, and consistency is the child of planning. Without it, growth is random, with it, growth is inevitable. This is not about perfection. Perfection is a myth. But direction is real, and direction, when honored consistently, reshapes your trajectory. You may not see the progress immediately. And that is where many quit. They mistake the absence of visible results for lack of advancement, but progress often happens beneath the surface before it ever becomes visible above it. A seed does not rush, yet it grows, and so does discipline, so does identity, so does transformation. And the plan is the soil. It nourishes your intention, it protects your consistency, it holds your commitment steady when impatience tries to convince you that nothing is happening. But something is always happening when direction exists. Growth is silent before it is seen, and those who understand this stop measuring progress by applause and start measuring it by alignment. By the quiet consistency of their effort, by the integrity of their repetition, because progress is not loud. It is loyal to intention, loyal to discipline, loyal to direction, and it rewards those who remain loyal when comfort tempts them to abandon the plan. Because comfort is seductive, it whispers, rest, delay, it can wait. And sometimes it can, but too often, comfort becomes a habit. And habits shape destiny. A plan interrupts the comfort cycle. It replaces comfort with choice, reaction with intention, uncertainty with structure, and structure builds confidence. Confidence builds consistency. Consistency builds momentum. Momentum builds transformation, not overnight, not magically, but permanently. Most people chase motivation when what they should be designing is process. Most people wait for inspiration when what they need is alignment. Most people want clarity when what they need is commitment. And commitment begins with a plan. A plan is not a guarantee, but it is a direction. It is a promise written not in words, but in behavior. And behavior repeated becomes destiny. The world does not change because of intentions. It changes because of decisions repeated. And when those decisions are guided by design, progress becomes sustainable. No plan, no progress. It is not punishment. It is cause and effect. Life does not respond to desire. It responds to structure, and the structure must come from you. No one will hand you your direction. No one will schedule your discipline. No one will design your future for you. And the moment you accept that truth, the moment you decide to take ownership, a shift occurs. You stop living by default and start living by design. You stop blaming and start building. You stop observing and start creating. And that is where power lies. Not in emotion, not in potential, but in aligned action guided by a plan, because progress does not begin when you feel ready. It begins when you commit to a system that moves you forward regardless of how you feel. And that is what separates those who evolve from those who merely exist. You do not need more energy, you need more direction. You do not need more time, you need better structure. You do not need more motivation, you need clarity that outlives motivation, and that clarity is built through planning. So the choice is simple: drift or design, react or direct, hope or architect, because no plan will always lead to the same destination. Stagnation, frustration, unfulfilled potential, but a plan, honored daily, even imperfectly, leads to progress. Steady, relentless, transformative progress, not because life becomes simpler, but because your direction becomes stronger. And strength, when guided by purpose, creates a future that reflects intention rather than accident. No plan, no progress, but with vision, structure, and disciplined direction, progress becomes not just possible, but permanent. And the moment you begin to respect your own design, life begins to respond not to what you wish for, but to what you consistently become. We admire momentum, we celebrate the grind, the late nights, the early mornings, the endless activity that looks like ambition from a distance. But movement is not the same as meaning, and effort is not the same as advancement. So many people are exhausted not because they are chasing too much, but because they are chasing without direction. They are running faster and faster on paths they never chose. They are working harder and harder toward destinations they never defined. And then they wonder why every milestone feels empty, because progress is not about speed, it's about alignment. A life without a plan is not a free life, it is a reactive life, a life where urgency replaces purpose, where noise replaces clarity, where activity replaces intention, and when intention is missing, progress becomes accidental. Fragile, unsustainable, we often believe that planning limits us, that structure kills creativity, that discipline suffocates freedom. But the opposite is true. A plan does not trap you. A plan liberates you. It gives your energy a direction. It gives your time a purpose. It gives your effort a meaning. Without a plan, you respond to what is loud. With a plan, you respond to what matters, and what most people never realize is that the absence of a plan is not neutral. It is a decision, a silent decision to let circumstances shape your future instead of your choices. When there is no plan, every distraction feels urgent, every opportunity feels equal, every emotion feels like a compass. And emotions are powerful, but they are unreliable navigators. Progress demands something deeper. It demands foresight. It demands patience. It demands clarity. Clarity about who you are. Clarity about where you are going. Clarity about why the journey matters, because when the why is clear, the how becomes survivable. A plan is not a checklist, it is a declaration that you are choosing intention over impulse, strategy over chaos, direction over drift. Think about the moments in life when you felt truly in control. Not just busy, not just occupied, but grounded, focused, aligned. Those moments did not happen randomly. They happened because there was a sense of meaning behind the motion. The human mind does not resist work. It resists meaningless work, and when there is no plan, every step feels heavier than it should, not because the path is harder, but because the purpose is unclear. When you plan, you are not predicting the future, you are preparing for it. You are building a framework that holds you steady when motivation fades. And motivation will fade always, because motivation is emotional. Progress is structural. You do not build a disciplined life on feelings. You build it on decisions. A plan makes those decisions visible. It shows you what to say no to. It shows you what truly deserves your time. It transforms ambition from a vague desire into a tangible direction. Most people do not fail because they are incapable. They fail because they are undefined. Undefined goals create undefined effort. Undefined effort creates undefined results. And undefined results create the illusion that success is random. But success is not random. It is designed. Designed by those who understand that consistency without strategy is slow-motion burnout. That passion without structure is emotional noise. That potential without planning is wasted brilliance. A plan is respect for your future self. It is saying, I am willing to sacrifice comfort today for clarity tomorrow. And clarity is powerful. Clarity gives you the ability to say, this is not for me. Clarity gives you courage to ignore applause that does not align. Clarity gives you strength to stay patient when results are slow, because progress is not immediate. Progress is cumulative. Small actions aligned with a clear plan become unstoppable over time. Small actions without a plan become forgettable. The difference is not talent, it is intention, and intentional living is rare. That is why progress feels rare. Because few people are willing to slow down long enough to define the path before sprinting down it. They mistake speed for significance, urgency for importance, loudness for leadership, but real leaders plan. They do not rush into reaction, they move with design. They understand that a calm, deliberate step forward is more powerful than a blind sprint. A plan does not guarantee success, but the absence of one guarantees confusion, and confusion eats energy. It fractures focus, it weakens consistency. The human mind needs direction, it needs a reason to endure discomfort, to persist when enthusiasm dies, to remain steady when progress feels invisible. That reason lives inside a plan. Because a plan is not about perfection, it is about intention. It gives you something to return to when the world pulls you off course. Something to ground you when doubt grows louder than belief. Progress is not built in moments of inspiration. It is built in moments of discipline that no one celebrates, no one applauds, no one even sees, and without a plan, those moments never accumulate. They scatter, but with a plan, even the smallest action holds weight, because it moves you deliberately towards something meaningful. Without a plan, life happens to you. With a plan, you shape your life, and shaping a life is not an act of control. It is an act of courage, the courage to decide who you will become before the world tells you who it wants you to be. The courage to move slowly with purpose instead of quickly without meaning. The courage to accept that progress is not glamorous. It is quiet, deliberate, patient, and powerful, because when direction exists, doubt weakens. When clarity exists, confusion disappears. When a plan exists, progress transforms from a hope into a system. No one accidentally creates a legacy. No one stumbles into fulfillment. No one drifts into greatness. They choose it, they design it, they plan for it. So the question is not whether you are capable. The question is whether you are intentional. Are you reacting to the demands of the moment? Or are you responding to the vision you created? Are you busy? Or are you building? Are you moving? Or are you progressing? Because there is a quiet truth that governs every successful journey. Direction beats effort. Clarity beats speed. Design beats desire. No plan means no foundation. And without a foundation, every step you take eventually collapses under its own weight. But when you build with purpose, when each action aligns with something larger than today's emotion, something profound happens. Your life stops feeling scattered, your work stops feeling heavy, your progress stops feeling accidental. And instead, it starts to feel like momentum, like movement that matters, like growth that lasts, because progress is never about doing more. It is about doing what matters most, and what matters most only reveals itself when you choose to plan. No plan, no progress, but with a plan you don't just move forward, you move with meaning.